Hey guys, welcome back, I'm Jay. In this episode, we're going to look at basic networking and security for EC2. Amazon VPC stands for Virtual Private Cloud. It lets you provision a logically isolated section of the AWS cloud, where you can launch AWS resources in a virtual network. This virtual network resembles a traditional network in a data center, with the benefits of using the scalable infrastructure of AWS. Amazon VPC is a networking layer for Amazon EC2. For example, when you launch an EC2 instance, you will launch it inside a subnet of a VPC. A VPC is a virtual network dedicated to your AWS account. A subnet is a range of IP addresses inside a VPC. You have a default VPC in each region, and a default subnet in each availability zone. A default VPC and subnet are ready for you to use, so that you don't have to create and configure your own VPC and subnet. You can immediately start launching Amazon EC2 instances into your default VPC. A default VPC and subnet are suitable for getting started quickly, and for launching public instances such as a blog or simple website. In addition, you can create non-default VPCs in a region and non-default subnet in an availability zone. So what is the relationship between VPC, subnet, region, and availability zone? VPC and subnet are the logical isolation of networking configuration. Region and availability zone represent geographical separation. Here is what it looks like. We know that inside an AWS region, there are multiple availability zones. They are the geographical separation of AWS resources. When you create an AWS account, you have a default VPC inside each AWS region, and a default subnet inside each availability zone in a region, created by AWS. For example, in the US East 1 Northern Virginia region, you have a default VPC and 6 subnets, which is one subnet for each AZ. You can directly launch EC2, Elastic Load Balancer in the default VPC and subnets, to reach your audience over the internet. Default VPC and subnets have all the networking configuration for you to get started in AWS quickly. In addition, you can create non-default VPCs and subnets, and customize network configuration yourself. When AWS creates the default VPC, you get a /16 IPv4 CIDR block, to provide up to 65,536 private IPv4 addresses. AWS also creates a default subnet in each availability zone, an Internet Gateway, a default security group, Network Access Control List or ACL, and DHCP option set. The default size /20 subnet can provide up to 4,096 addresses. The Internet Gateway connects to your default VPC, so your resources inside the VPC can reach the Internet. The default security group and Network ACL act as firewalls. Default DHCP option set specifies Amazon provided domain name server for AWS assigned DNS. The default subnet is a public subnet, as the main route table sends the subnet's traffic that is destined for the Internet, to the Internet Gateway. EC2 instances that you launch into a default subnet, receive a public and private IPv4 address. Without a public IP address, your audience won't be able to reach these instances over the Internet. You might have heard of EC2 Classic before. EC2 Classic platform was introduced in the original release of Amazon EC2. However, it is replaced by Amazon VPC. With EC2 Classic, your instances run in a single, flat network that you share with other customers. With Amazon VPC, your instances run in a virtual private cloud logically isolated from other AWS accounts. For all new AWS accounts created after December 2, 2013, AWS doesn't support EC2 Classic, so you must launch your Amazon EC2 instances in a VPC. All new AWS accounts only support Amazon VPC. Amazon EC2 and VPC support IPv4 and IPv6 addressing. By default, EC2 and VPC use IPv4, and you cannot disable it. However, you can optionally assign an IPv6 CIDR block to your VPC and subnets. IPv4 is made of a 32-bit number and displayed in a dot-delimited notation, such as 10.0.0.1. There is a limited IPv4 range available on the Internet. IPv6 is a newer Internet protocol using 128 bits for IP address. IPv6 address comprises 8 groups of 4 hexadecimal digits, with virtually unlimited address range. IPv4 is commonly used for web servers, mobile servers. IPv6 is commonly used for the Internet of Things. AWS use both private and public IPv4 for communication inside AWS and over the internet. IPv6 created in AWS is always public. When you launch an EC2 instance in the default subnet, you will receive both private and public IP addresses for your instance. Private IPv4 is not reachable over the internet, it's for communication between EC2 instances and other resources inside VPC. Private IPv4 address is always associated with instance after it's been created, even when the instance is stopped. Private IPv4 address will only be released after the instance is terminated. Public IPv4 is reachable over the internet. It will be released when the instance is stopped or terminated. Once it's released, you cannot reuse the IP address. Public IPv4 address will change after the instance is restarted. You cannot disassociate or associate public IP address to an instance manually. Elastic IP address for IPv4 is another option, primarily used to remap the address to another instance in the case of an instance failure. It's a static public IP address associate with the AWS account. You can associate and disassociate an EIP to an instance manually. After an instance has been associated with an EIP, AWS will release the original public IP assigned to the instance. When you disassociate the EIP, AWS will assign a new public IP to the instance. There are some limits with the elastic IP address. For example, you can have up to 5 EIPs per region. When an EIP is not associated with any instances, there is a small charge for it. Security group is a virtual firewall for your instance to control incoming and outgoing traffic. Inbound rules control the incoming traffic to the instance, and outbound rules control the outgoing traffic from the instance. When AWS creates the default VPC, a default security group is automatically created. The default security group allows inbound traffic from the network interfaces that are assigned to the same security group. The default security group also allows all outbound traffic originating from the instance. When you launch an instance, you can specify security groups, otherwise, it's associated with the default security group. Security group rules are permissive. You can only allow traffic, but not explicitly deny traffic. To deny specific traffic, you need to use Network Access Control List. When AWS creates the default VPC, a default network ACL is also created to allow all traffic. Security groups are stateful. Response traffic is always allowed, if the request traffic is allowed regardlessly. For example, if your instance sends a request to a target destination, the response traffic from the target is allowed to flow into the instance, regardless of inbound security group rules. Response to the allowed inbound traffic is also allowed to flow out, regardless of outbound rules. You can associate multiple security groups with one instance. When you associate multiple security groups with an instance, the rules from each security group are effectively aggregated to create one set of rules. You can add or remove security group rules at any time. Changes are automatically applied to the instances that are associated with the security group. You can only specify rules to allow traffic, but not specify rules to explicitly deny traffic. You can specify protocols, port range, source and destination to be allowed. For instance, you have inbound rules that allow SSH connection on port 22 from a specific source IP address, and all HTTP and HTTPS traffic from the internet. All zero IP range means all IP addresses over the internet. The outbound rules allow all traffic from your instance to all destinations. When you launch an instance, you are prompted to add a key pair to the instance. EC2 allows secure remote connection to instances using public and private key pairs. You can use key pairs to SSH if you're a Mac or Linux user, or open SSH or PuTTY if you're a Windows user, to connect to EC2 instances remotely from your local computer. You can create a key pair using EC2, or import your own public key to EC2. EC2 stores the public key on AWS, and you keep the private key locally. When you remotely connect to the EC2 instance, you must specify the corresponding private key. Once you have connected to the instance, you can access and control the instance from your local computer. In this episode, we've learned the basic concept of EC2 networking and security. A VPC is a virtual network dedicated to your AWS account. A subnet is a range of IP addresses inside a VPC. When you create an AWS account, you have a default VPC in each region, and default subnet in each availability zone. You can directly launch EC2 instances inside a subnet in a VPC. Security groups are virtual firewalls to control inbound and outbound traffic of your instances. You can add multiple security groups to an instance, and specify security group rules to allow traffic for a specific protocol, port range, source and destination. Security groups can only allow traffic, but not explicitly deny traffic. EC2 allows remote connection to instances using public and private key pairs. You can create a key pair using EC2, or import your own public key to EC2. You can use the private key to securely connect to the instance remotely. Okay, that's all for EC2 networking and security. Thanks for watching and see you in the next episode.
Hope you've enjoyed watching this episode. If you liked the video, please help us and hit the like button. If you want to watch more tutorials, please subscribe to the Cloudemy TV channel. Make sure to turn on the notification and stay tuned. At Cloudemy, we're passionate about cloud and AI technology. Please share your feedback and thoughts in the comments below. Feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to watch. Happy watching and happy learning.